Hi everyone, this is Sol again with another environment creation tutorial. Now, in the last tutorial, we talked about baking lighting in a simple environment. If you watched that one already, you'll notice that I've added some things in here. And this video is going to be focused on some added functionality that you can include in your environments by doing some things in Blender. Now, those things are going to be adding chairs. You can see my character over here and the one that I am right now are in chairs. You can hop out and sitting right on there. Another thing that we're going to talk about is instancing. I did that for these plants. And we're also going to talk about adding in easy panels so that you can quickly and easily add in assets like streaming screens, whiteboards, images, videos, and they're already aligned in the scene without you having to add it in and move it around in the 3D space and try to line it up with walls or things like that. So helps a lot with ease of use. And also making your own custom navigation mesh basis models. So the scene or frame by default creates a nav mesh based on all of the geometry that's in your scene. And that can cause some issues in some cases, especially when you have chairs. Now, a lot of the time, if you have a ceiling and you add in a chair and you're sitting in your chair, if you get out of your chair, then you'll be transported up to the ceiling, which is not what we want. Because there's a navigation mesh up there. And then you're kind of stuck there and you can't get down because there's no walkway down to the lower story. So I'll be talking about how we can avoid that and decide for yourself where you want people to be able to walk and where you don't want people to be able to walk. Alright, so now let's go into Blender and see how it is done. Bring this over to my other screen. Alright, so on the frame side, you can see there's some empties arranged around the scene. You have some empties where the seat positions are, and we have some empties where the easy panels are located. Now over here, I'll show you our nav mesh basis file model. Now it's intersecting the floor geometry here so that we're getting all that Z fighting, but you can see that I've kind of cut out areas where I don't want people to be able to walk to. Alright, so first let's talk about chairs. Now, our avatars are, their seated position has their seat at 0.4 meters above the ground plane. So when you're making your chairs, you want to make sure that the height of the seat of the chair is at 0.4 meters. And you'll also want your empty here to be aligned with that at about 0.4 meters high. And there's a naming convention that tells Frame that this object in your scene is supposed to be the location of your chair. So you just have to name it FCTA. If it includes, or if your empty has that FCTA in the title, then Frame will register it as a chair locator and it will add one. And also the local orientation of your chair, the Y plus is going to be the direction that people face when they are seated in that chair. You can see. So I'm gonna get rid of a few of these just so I can show you the process of creating them from scratch. Just delete all these right here. Oh, whoops, not the environment. Delete. Okay, and I'm going to shift right click on the surface that I want to add it onto. And then I'm going to hit Shift A and add in an empty, plain axes empty. I don't think that matters, but that's what I like to use for these. Let's see, and I'm going to drag this into my chairs folder here, collection. And I'm going to rename this FCTA right from the beginning. The first one makes it easier because then when you duplicate it, all the rest already have FCTA in their name. All right, so now I'm going to rotate the local y-axis facing towards the table, perpendicular to the table. And I'll just do RZ90, oh, and then RZ180. All right, now it's facing the direction I want it to be. Now I'm going to duplicate it and move it in the x-axis since we're still in local space. And shift the X, move it only in the x-axis. Now I'm going to duplicate all of these, shift D, RZ90, oh whoops, switch this over to median point for the pivot point, RZ90, now they're in relation to each other the same, and just move these right about there. Alright, so those look good. They don't have to be absolutely perfect. The closer to the edge, the better in general, so that the legs aren't intersecting the chair. So yeah, those look good. Now, for the easy panels. Now, you basically do the same thing for the chairs as you put it in the location that you'd like it to be. You align the local Y of the empty pointing the direction that you want your easy panel to be facing, so outwards from the surface. And you name it easy panel underscore. And as long as easy panel underscore is in the name, Frame will recognize it as an easy panel locator. And for controlling the size of the like the location size of the easy panel, you're going to change the X and Z scaling. Now, what you can do is go into edit mode on your object, and this is the way I like to do it. I like to enable edge length, and then if I select this face, it gives me the edge length 5.3 meters wide and 3.2 meters tall. Now you'll notice that these values are not the same as that, 5.3 and 3.2. The reasoning for that is that I wanted my streaming screen to be a little bit smaller than the actual size of this panel here. So you can kind of tweak these values and export and see what it looks like in frame to kind of get the alignment the way that you want it, because it'll change the button placement and the size of the assets that that load in that spot. So for your specific needs and the way that you want it to line up, you can change those as you like. Now for instancing, these plants, I baked 2 different plants to one texture, this one and this one. And for baking them, I placed them kind of in more evenly lit areas so that I could rotate them around and have the lighting be similar from each side, so that, you know, if I baked it up against this wall here, these leaves back here would be darker because they're closer to the wall, and then if you rotate it and have it facing further, that area facing away from the wall, it wouldn't look quite right because it would be darker where it should be lighter. So when I'm doing instancing, I like to kind of try to get some relatively even lighting on my objects that I want to instance around my scene. And all you have to do to instance is just do Alt D instead of Shift D. Instead of duplicate, you do an instance, Alt D. So Alt D and then Shift Z. Oh, I'm in local. G, Shift Z, and then you can just move it around wherever you want. Rotate it, scale it, whatever. And then you've got a new instance. And now the reason that you would want to use instances is it lowers file size and it lowers memory usage. So faster load times and higher performance. You can fit more into your GPU if you're instancing stuff than if every single one of these objects was like its own unique geometry. And then you can reuse textures. Now you could do that without instancing, but it's helpful. Especially if performance is really important to you. Now, if it isn't so important and you want every single object to have the perfect lighting for the exact place that it is in the scene, then you wouldn't want to use instancing, and you'd want to just have them all their own separate objects or separate geometry and bake, you know, have their UVs laid out in different areas of the UV map and bake different lighting onto each one of them. But in this case, I wanted to show how you can kind of like improve performance and still have kind of detailed meshes. Oh, let me turn off edge length. See, these are relatively low poly, but still a lot higher poly than anything else in the scene, really. Like, see, there's almost 5,000 triangles here, and then if I go into the whole model, there's 5,000 triangles in the entire thing, and then 5,000 in just one plant. And so instead of storing all of those, all the data for all of those for every single plant, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of those fig plants, 7, 8, 9, 10, so 10. What that would be almost 50,000 triangles. But here we're just storing just around 10,000. Now I baked in the lighting with these plants in place. Not this one because that wasn't there, but so it's nice. You can use the same asset over and over and kind of integrate it into your scene pretty seamlessly by getting the shadows on your base model. And something to note for this is that these models came in with these PNG textures, and in their material, if you switch over to Eevee in the rendered mode, the blend mode was set to alpha blend, and that was creating some strange issues where the leaves that were behind other leaves were actually rendering in front of them. So to avoid that, you switch the blend mode over to alpha clip. The alpha makes the illusion that there's, more geometry here than there is. The edges of the leaves can look nicer, even though there's some aliasing. I think they look pretty good. Yeah, now let's talk about the nav mesh. So all that you have to do with a nav mesh is only have geometry where you want people to be able to walk. Since we don't want people walking on the ceiling, there isn't even a complete ceiling, we only include the floor here. Now, I'm fine with people walking through the table. If you don't want people to walk through the table, then you can cut out the area on the floor where the table is. It's a little bit cleaner way of doing it than if you added the actual table geometry in here. Because then you could accidentally get up on the table and then not be able to walk off of the table. So I don't even include them a lot of the time, but if you don't want people to be able to walk through the table, you can just cut it right out on the floor. And the way that we export this is we'll export this object only. I only selected the nav mesh basis, and then I will export that as you have to have _nm at the end of the file name. And so that's what I'm doing. Export. And in the export settings, make sure you only have selected objects so that that's the only thing that's getting exported. And then to export all this stuff, select everything with A, file export. Since I have PNGs in here, I'm just going to make sure that the material export is just automatic, so it's exporting whatever image in its current state. All right, and I'll just overwrite this one. And the way that you get this into frame with your navmesh basis model also is going into frame settings, upload custom environment, and then you select both files, the navmesh basis file and your environment file, and then upload. And so rather than using the environment model itself for the navmesh generation, it's going to use your navmesh basis file, and it'll create the navmesh a lot faster with that than if it was having to process all of the geometry in your scene. My other guy is still sitting because nice. Now can't walk up here, can't walk into the plant. Stopped. And we can walk through the table. And we can sit in these chairs. Let's see. These are the ones that I just added in. Bam. Great, so it's all working nicely. We've got our easy panels. Let's add in. Alright, that is it for this tutorial. I hope that was helpful, and I can't wait to see what you guys do with it. Alright, have a nice day.